Consider for a moment the landscape of anime released in 2019. The general quality and sheer variety of anime has reached a point where there's probably been an anime released in the last 12 months in your favorite genre that is superbly good, and about 14 that are absolute trash. This makes creating a top 5 list almost seem futile, in that placing the truly superior shows above or below each other comes down to nitpicks and deep-rooted personal biases. Let me state the obvious. Everyone's list will always be different. Wars have been waged, blood has been shed, and friends have been lost over which anime deserves to take the top spot in a given season or year. Because in this day and age, anime can be for everyone since there exists an anime for everyone. We here at the Weebology podcast are well aware of this fact because every time we watch a list together, it always comes down to, that made the number 1 spot? Are you fucking serious? So, we had an idea. Instead of agreeing on a single top 5 list, we decided to have
a top 5 duel.
We both come up with our lists in secret, making competing videos showing off our lists and see how the shows and their placements differ from each other. Later on, we'll have a podcast episode talking about why our lists ended up the way they did. My particular list will take approachability, visual quality, and novel plot into account when ranking certain shows, though you will still notice a genre trend with mine because I am still a shonen schmuck at heart. Welcome back to class, students. I'm your Weebology professor, Ricky, and this is my top 5 anime of 2019. Vinland Saga is a show I've called 2019's darkest horse in the past, and I meant it both figuratively and literally. Leveraging a unique story about Vikings and the European historical setting as its initial hook, Western audiences who are fresh and seasoned to anime alike will find something to enjoy here. Thorfinn, and the whole cast are some of the most likable characters to have been created this year. And the story is reminiscent of a Game of Thrones style story, serving up a proper mixture of vengeance, maturity, and personal stakes that somewhere in this narrative is something anyone of any background can relate to. Even if the retelling of the Danish and English conflicts in the 11th century isn't your thing, the action is grounded in reality with intricate yet believable combat, and the animation is so cinematic that my jaw nearly dropped at the beauty of some of these scenes. It's probably one of the best examples of an anime in 2019 that can be truly for almost everybody. Though the label of Darkest Horse is to be taken at face value, as one would expect from a show being labeled as seinen anime. It's mature in both themes and number of heads severed from necks, though it never feels like it steps into the boundary of annoyingly edgy. The time period itself was gritty and primal, and Wit Studios does an incredible job highlighting what makes this point in history worth diving into. It's refreshing to see an anime tailored for an older audience handled with so much care, and it results in a solid number 5 spot on this list. However, this is anime after all, and sometimes a show has to do what anime does best, and get a little bit mental. Now, I suspect this show didn't even make Ethan's list, and to that I say, Ethan, my guy, what in the fuck are you thinking? I'm a sucker for fluid animation and an unorthodox art style, and Mob Psycho 100 Season 2 exemplifies the best anime has to offer in this regard. Some of the fights and action scenes are so beautiful and off the wall that it's practically impossible to exist outside of animation. Oh, what the fuck? With talented animator Yoshimichi Kamada at the helm, he brings a visual personality basically unseen in anime up to Season 1's release, and Season 2 seems to take it to an even more striking level. I'm not exaggerating when I say this animation is some of the most fun and memorable animation styles to be released this year, and this isn't to say there isn't a great narrative to boot either. Mob is still essentially a telekinetic god, even with ultra-powerful espers coming out of the woodwork left and right. But despite being at that summit, Mob still wants to better himself in a very normal way, with pure hard work. And this is where Season 2 really shines. The character development is incredible with its message of you aren't special just because you're blessed, smothered all over the season. Even Reagan, the shifty, morally gray con artist sensei, undergoes real positive change by the end of the season. But don't get it twisted though, he's still shady as fuck. In the end, Mob Psycho 100 Season 2 comes in at number 4 and serves as a powerful reminder that with anime, there is always new ground to be gained. But it isn't just a season of beautiful visuals to get your audience hooked. Sometimes all you need is just one moment. The Promise Neverland dropped at the beginning of the year, and it set the bar for 2019 anime so incredibly high. The first episode of the season punches you in the gut so hard that you can't help but ignore your family, your friends, and duties for a whole 3 hours to binge it all the way through. Seriously, if you haven't seen this show, I wouldn't blame you. No, I demand of you to stop what you're doing right now and just watch that first episode. It's hard to even talk about this show without spoiling anything. But what I can say is the story is so brilliant and gripping that it probably takes the cake for 2019's best anime writing. Every episode is full of twists, turns, and mysterious hints about the world around Emma, Norman, and Ray that I was on the edge of my seat for an entire season straight, screaming at my TV when an episode ends, "No! I can't wait another week! There has to be more!" Each conversation and moment of dialogue is covered in intensity and purpose, and not a single word is unimportant. I often rewind a fight scene to see that sweet Sakuga in an action anime, but with Promise Neverland, I find myself doing the same thing with character interactions as to not miss a single phrase or expression. Even though the story is the obvious star here, the visuals are no slouch either. With the clever use of CGI, every scene contains a sense of dread and thriller vibes that make you feel like you're watching something you shouldn't, causing a shortness of breath you only get with the best of live-action thriller stories. While some other stories in the past, both anime and live action, can be compared to this show in some way, The Promise Neverland stands alone in its uniqueness and meticulous storytelling style. It'll leave you wanting so much more, and for my undying obsession with what will happen next, it lands at my number 3. The writing here truly is methodical, but to end up higher on this list, you have to get a little more scientific. Dr. Stone is one of those rare shows that feels like it's in a genre all of its own, and it's taken the world by storm with its fresh story, beautiful aesthetic, mostly, and its novel take on how truly insane anime hair can get. Being set 3,700 years in the future with everyone turned to statues, it sets the stage for an incredible and novel challenge, bringing humanity back to the level of modern technology with the brainpower of just one kid, and having the audience trying to decide whether this counts as an isekai or not. Science as a concept is on full display here, being utilized by Senku not only to achieve the overall mission, but to win the hearts and minds of the people in this primitive world, oftentimes being done at the exact same time. A prime example is when he created a cotton candy machine, to both give the villagers a literal taste of the future, but also act as a prototype for creating thin metal wires for increasingly complex technology. The simplest act of science feels like a massive accomplishment here, resulting in a progression system that feels rewarding, yet grounded in reality. So much so, there's actually a disclaimer at the end of each episode warning viewers that all the science in the show is accurate, and any attempts to recreate it could get your fingers blown off. The themes in this plot are also surprisingly in-depth when it comes to the philosophy of science, and even explores whether science's involvement in human society is a positive or negative one. The visuals here aren't exactly going to scratch that crispy, fluid action itch, and there really isn't much action in this show to begin with. But that's the beauty of Dr. Stone. It doesn't need much action to drive the plot forward. Instead, what you'll get are beautiful backgrounds, amazing vistas, and clear visual maps showing how the science itself works through every step. And that's where the magic of the show lies. Science doesn't need action because the action is the science. And seeing how the world around all the characters change rapidly as technology is introduced is an experience unlike anything at anime right now. It's a story that will tug at your brain and your heart, and 10 billion% deserves to be the number 2 spot. Before I drop my number 1 pick, you know we gotta hit some of those honorable mentions. Roll it! The Rise of the Shield Hero was one I almost passed up due to my waning interest in isekais. The genre itself felt on the cusp of just cash grabs and harem bait. Looking at you, Ari Ferretta! But this show managed to tweak things in such a way that brought life back into the genre and still recaptured some of what made the classic isekais feel so fun. The show understood that viewers have seen these tropes before, and trimmed away the fat from the early games to not insult the audience. Naofumi as a main character didn't have the luxury of starting out OP. Hell, he didn't even start out at ground zero. Through the actions of one of the most hated, cold-hearted, punchable antagonists of this year, Naofumi had to begin his adventure with only a shield, no party, and all-around social ostracism as debuffs against him. While in the end, he does become the Big Daddy OP MC that kills freaks and claps cheeks, the way he goes about it feels both fresh and rewarding. If this were a top 10 list, it would definitely fall on it. In the last several years, you couldn't see a list without My Hero Academia popping up in some capacity. Now, this might be a hot take, but I feel as though My Hero Academia has taken a bit of a dip in overall quality as the series progresses. I know, class, settle down. But the most recent arc is no exception, with recap episodes to kick off a slow start to the season, and an oddly timed break which was no doubt caused by the upcoming release of the new movie. It's gotten off to a bit of a rocky start to close out this year. I do have high hopes for it though, showing signs of a fantastic narrative and a more interesting hero and villain design set. 2020 looks like it'll be a great year for My Hero Academia, but as for 2019, it doesn't have enough showings for me to give it a top spot on this list, even though I really wanted to because I'm kind of a Deku level fanboy of this IP. This one made me a sad panda. One Punch Man Season 1 was arguably one of the most influential animes of the decade, with an incredibly fresh take on both superheroes and action anime alike, and some of the most beautiful action anime I have ever seen. Season 2 suffered from a studio change and an insanely short timeline, so much of the potential was already snuffed out before it even hit the screen. That being said, the plot was much more interesting and existent than Season 1, and introduced some of the most enjoyable characters in this series to date. Garu, the hero hunter, especially was one of the main reasons I stuck with it this year, giving a whole new perspective on power growth and shonen main character tropes but from a villain perspective. Season 1 made waves, and Season 2 kind of rode its wake. It was still a super enjoyable season to watch, and I'm in no way saying it was poorly handled, but the whole time I couldn't help but wonder what this season could have been. Alright, now for that number 1 spot, though something tells me a lot of you already saw this one coming. If Vinland Saga is this year's dark horse, then Demon Slayer is this year's frontrunner shiny knight for best overall anime, because holy shit, this show was good. Demon Slayer embodies the phrase, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and it didn't hurt that the parts were also some masterclass level shit as well. The story is endearing, with a familiar premise, demon hunters fighting demons, in a somehow timeless setting, blending in feudal Japan countrysides with European-style turn-of-the-century bustling urban areas. The stakes were personable and relatable, spotlighting the relationship between Tanjiro and Nezuko-chan, his insanely adorable demon sister, as they try to discover the cure for her demonism? The characters were some of the most fun and heartwarming personalities to grace anime this year on the heroic side, but something people sleep on in their reviews are the demons and their designs. From drum-playing shapeshifters to whole fucking families of spider folk occupying an entire mountain, the villains as a whole boast genuinely creepy and creative designs, yet the show manages to make you feel sympathetic for several of them. And let's not forget that animation.
Jesus Christ!
I just want to shake every person's hand over at Ufotable because this, without a shadow of a doubt, is the most overall beautiful show I've seen all year. Now don't get me wrong, other shows have had better backgrounds, and maybe a show managed a better looking fight or two, but the sheer consistency of crispiness in the time when they weren't flexing was astounding alone. But when it came time to see a little action... What? I mean, come on with that! I think Demon Slayer started out strong in the minds of the anime community, as most of the people I talked to were completely blindsided by this, myself included. I didn't really pick it up until maybe halfway through the season was finished, But I think for me, Demon Slayer reveals the beauty of the seasonal anime space right now. By putting your faith in a random show that just piques a little bit of interest amongst a sea of options, you might just find the best anime of the year. Well, that's my list. If you agreed with my rundown, be sure to like and subscribe to the Weebology podcast channel here on YouTube. We have a bunch planned for 2020, and we wouldn't want you to miss a thing. And if you didn't agree with my list, go check out Ethan's list and see how his stacks up to mine. Who knows, Ethan's take might just be your thing. You can listen to the podcast proper on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, right here, or wherever else you get your podcast fixed. But until next time, thanks y'all for coming to class. I'm Ricky, and this has been Weebology. Deuces!